From the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg, this is a special edition of Inside Government with Charity Dunker.
Hello everyone, I'm Charity Dunker and welcome to this edition of Inside Government. On this edition of Inside Government, we'll be focused on noise pollution as we also have a campaign running on the subject. Here joining me on this edition of Inside Government is none other than Inspection Head over at TIAT, Mr. Lucian Wilson. How are you doing and welcome?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining me. As we know, in the past, and I think it's still occurring, we would hear many vehicles with loud music, and also we would hear of different night spots and with the loud sounds, okay? We would like to also find out what's laws against that, if there's any, and also what's being done to curb that. So let's get into it.
Okay.
What is noise pollution?
So in the most basic definition, noise pollution is any harmful or annoying level of noise. That's the most basic definition that you can get that would describe what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what is the law concerning noise pollution?
So there's no specific law in St. Martin that covers noise pollution per se. Noise pollution is, however, addressed across various laws that fall under several ministries within the government. For the Ministry of TIAT specifically, we have the National Permits Ordinance, which regulates businesses that trade in food, beverage, and also accommodation where you have to pay to stay there like a hotel. Within that ordinance, it has some prohibitions. So, for example, you need to be a permit holder. You need to have a permit to have any one of these types of businesses. And then you also need to request in writing permission from the Minister of TIAT to have music, performances, provide entertainment, have dancing. So that basically means if you're a bar, a restaurant, or a hotel, you have to get written permission from the minister before you can provide those forms of entertainment.
All right, it's quite a process.
Yes.
Yeah, but I see the reason why it's also needed. The various aspects when we talk about noise pollution, what are they?
So some of the aspects of noise pollution are, of course, you can have noise from cars, whether they're altering their muffler, noise from cars with amplified sound systems. We see them driving around all the time. Speakers blasting loud music. That could be from a home, noise from bars, restaurants, and also noise from house parties. All those are different aspects of noise pollution.
Car noise, bar noise. What else do we have? We have party noise.
Yeah.
To what level is the sound supposed to be kept at?
Well, the various laws, they're not that specific. In most cases, they will say, for example, you can't be a nuisance to your neighbor. From that aspect, it's subjective because what may be okay for me may not be okay for another person. Mm-hmm. With respect to TIAT, what we do is in the permit that's issued to the business, we establish a maximum, what we call a decibel level of maximum volume of sound that a business can produce, and that can be heard outside of the business.
Okay. Now you mentioned of the department, and that was actually going to be my next question. How does your department deal with the noise pollution when a complaint comes in?
Yeah, so we deal, just to be specific, TIAT, we deal with what we call entertainment noise, which, as I said before, is basically noise that's being generated from the entertainment or the hospitality industry. Okay. So when we receive a complaint, or as a result of us doing our normal controls, we will investigate the source of the noise. It could be a business or several businesses that could be causing the nuisance, and that could be due to a high volume of music that's coming from the establishment. What we use is a calibrated digital noise meter to measure the volume of music that's generated from the business, from the outside of the business. And if they're exceeding their permit conditions, then what we do is we follow some recommended steps in our enforcement policy, which could be anything from a verbal warning, issuing a monetary fine, or ultimately revoking the permit or the permission to have entertainment. But that last step, the revocation, that would be done based on the decision of the minister.
Mm-hmm. To file a complaint, noise complaint, what is the process and procedure?
So we have various avenues that the public can use to contact government and file a complaint. primarily is they can email the ministry, and that would be at tiatcomplaints@stmartingov.org. They can also come to the department in person. We're located on 1 Street Erskine Boulevard, number 6. That's on the way to Point Blanche, opposite the Fairway Market. They could also call the department. Our telephone number is 542-5641. However, we do prefer that complaints are done in writing. So either if you're going to come to the department, you deliver your complaint in writing, or you send us an email at tiatcomplaints@stmartingov.org, because it makes it easier for us to follow up and everything's done in writing.
Okay. You also mentioned, we're going to fall back a bit on when you mentioned about like the gauging monitor system. What is the name again?
It's a digital noise meter, but it's calibrated. So you have various out there. We've even seen some business owners or persons who download an app on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
That app gives you an indication of what the noise level will be, but for enforcement purposes, we use an actual digital noise meter, and it's calibrated. Calibrated means that it has been sent to a lab and certified in terms of the accuracy of that.
So you're saying that to say this, even if the business owner has their own, it might not fall in sync with what you're using.
It will not be as accurate as a calibrated, dedicated noise meter, but it will give you an indication.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Also, what is the process for a license permit in this regard?
So there's two things. There's the permit and there's the permission. So assuming that you already have a permit to have a bar, a restaurant, or a hotel, then you submit a letter to the minister, an application, as it were, requesting permission to give music, entertainment, dancing at your location, and you have to pay the associated application and license fees. If you don't already have a permit, then you follow the same process, but of course you'll be applying for a business permit as well as the permission to provide that type of service. So the written request can be submitted along with the required support and documentation at Counter B at the Government Administration Building.
Okay, perfect. And we're going to take a break momentarily, but let me just get one more in.
Mm-hmm.
What laws are in place to ensure the proper compliance?
So the law that TAYAT deals with is called the National Permits Ordinance that requires permit holders to request permission to provide entertainment. And of course, violation of that law also comes with consequences of a fine of up to 5,000 guilders or 4 months in jail.
Okay. Hold that thought.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take this break. Once again, I'm Charity Dunker here on Inside Government Interview, being joined by the head of inspection over at TIAT. And we're talking everything based on noise pollution. Do stay tuned. I'll be back right after this.
You ever hear Earthquake call and say, "Hello, Mr. Mara, it's me. Earthquake coming in Tuesday around 10. No, sir. Earthquake does arrive unannounced, and when it comes, it'll shake all the sense and the sensibility out of we. Remain calm, stay inside, and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Once the shaking start and you know it's an earthquake, make a quick move to a safe place. Don't run to the doorway or any exit, and the stairs that may be broke up or even full of people. Elevator, avoid that because you might get in and then poof, power gone, and you're stuck in a box without air. Take cover under a strong table or a bed, or crouch against an inside wall or in a corner and cover your face and your head with your arms. Remember, DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Glass windows and doors, outside walls in an earthquake, that is bad news. Take care of yourself. Most injuries during earthquakes happen when something drops and hit people entering or exiting a building. Last thing, don't bother run outside and ask, "You feel it? You feel it?" Remain calm, stay indoors until all the shaking stop and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on.
This public service announcement was brought to you by Sedima and the Government of St. Martin.
Welcome back. If you have missed any part of this interview, worry not. We're going to proceed right now. Again, in talks with the head of inspection over at TIAT, we're talking everything based on noise pollution. Before the break, also, you made mention of what's the process, what's going to happen in terms of persons who do not comply. You have to stick within a certain ratio within noise, and the compliances. Now we have cars, for example, sound system and stereo sets. I know that there are also laws against that, I'm sure. Yeah. What actions can TIAT also take inspection-wise on that?
Good question. So, Tia, we deal with economic activity. So, with respect to vehicles on the public road that are causing a nuisance because of, like I said, it could be they've altered their vehicle with the muffler, or they're playing loud music from a sound system in their car, that wouldn't fall under TIAT. Because it's a vehicle on the public road, complaints with regard to that should be directed towards the police.
Okay.
It's a public nuisance, or could be a public nuisance.
What are the short-term solutions to curb the noise pollution as well, and also, what can be done?
Good question. So for a short-term solution, one short-term solution would be to delegate the authority to, for example, my department, because we do the enforcement for the ministry, to penalize violators on the spot. So in other words, for fines to be issued on the spot without the intervention of the prosecutor's office. Because right now what we do is we issue a summons for a fine, and then we submit that to the prosecutor's office, and then the prosecutor will actually sanction or fine the person. Or for violators to be shut down, of course, if they are repeatedly violating, they should be able to be shut down without the intervention of the decision-making authority, which in this case would be the minister. So for consequences to be more immediate as opposed to having to go through a longer process.
Okay. So once again, it would be TIAT, and then after you send the letter.
Yes.
That's how that works, and then onwards to prosecutor's office.
Yeah. So what we basically do is we draft a report on what we find, and then we send that to the public prosecutor's office. And based on what our findings are, they will decide, okay, we're going to issue a fine to the person, yes or no.
All right.
On the long term, regulations to ensure stricter requirements to qualify for an entertainment license, soundproofing of buildings or the establishment where you want to carry out that activity, as well as proper zoning, that to ensure that if you want to engage in what we would call potentially nuisance or an activity that could create a nuisance, we say, well, not we, but government as a whole, in this case, zoning falls under VROMI, you would say that type of activity should happen in this area,
For
in a specific
example,
area.
So if you're going to have a concert,
Yeah.
right? And we know concert noise is different. It ranges different to that of a night spot.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, then there's also, is the meter used then at that time?
It can be, but for example, Carnival, it's the Festival Village. It's an open air establishment, so it'd be quite hard to contain that noise. But things can be used. There's technology. There's all sorts of things now where you're looking at how you position the speakers and monitoring sound levels. Those things can be used to minimize the nuisance, but not eliminate the nuisance.
Okay. Also, you touched base on prosecutor's office, for example, but still, if you could also elaborate a bit more, what is their role exactly, prosecutor's office, in this situation?
So the public prosecutor is the one that takes a decision on prosecuting offenders when there's a criminal complaint or violation or what have you. So like when we go to a particular establishment, we will investigate, and based on our findings, we'll draft a report. And that report goes to the public prosecutor's office, and based on what we've determined or detected, they will take a decision on whether they're going to prosecute, yes or no.
Okay. Businesses that will be opening within the framework of their licenses, what will be the repercussions? Yeah, if they do not fall in line with that. Also, what would you say that you would encourage them to do once you've got your business license, you're about to open? You mentioned of soundproofing. Are there more processes or procedures or recommendations that you would give to those business owners?
Good question. So businesses not found operating within their permit conditions, that's a violation. The minister issues you a permit, it has conditions in it, you have a purpose, and you should operate according to what you have permission to do. If you are found in violation, and that's where our enforcement policy comes in, and we can take several actions, as I alluded to. It could be anything from a verbal warning, documented warning, up to a fine. In terms of what a business should do, once you've decided that you want to engage in this type of business, you have to look at the location where you want to establish and soundproof. You don't need to wait until someone complains in order to do the right thing. We champion being a good neighbor. So yes, you have this business, but how can I be a good neighbor and minimize the nuisance I will be or could be to my community? And also dialogue with your community. If someone contacts you and lets you know, well, hey, the music last night or tonight is loud, adjust that. Everybody wants to have a good time in your establishment, but there's no need to have music at a volume that is really, really just unnecessary.
All right. And the inspections are carried out. When the inspection is being carried out, it would be, you will also come together and work together closely with the police department to join you when you go ahead and run a test. How does that work?
Yes. So we can do it jointly or on our own. So we normally go out and do controls usually at night because that's when the most of the complaints will come in over the weekend, and investigate, see if businesses are complying with the permit conditions. We could also go along with the police. Sometimes we do targeted controls with the police because they are the striker arm or the strong arm of the law. If necessary, they will assist us, but normally we do it on our own.
Okay. Also, legislation regarding the processing of business licenses and the regulation of noise level. Any?
The noise levels are regulated in our, what we call the REP, the Residential Economic Policy, as well as businesses wanting to engage in this type of activity may also be required to have a business license. Depending on ownership, is it a local resident or not, and as well as the National Permits Ordinance, which regulates the sale of food and beverages, as well as accommodation for money.
Okay. What would you say, for example, in your year's experience in being inspector of such, what are the different complaints received, and during which time of year would these complaints mostly be at a high? Is it during high season? Is it during the carnival season?
Oddly enough, carnival season is usually when it's the most quiet because the majority of the island is attending carnival. So, you won't have a lot of activities going on to the same level of outside of carnival season. So for us, mostly it's the peak season, which has recently just started. And then around specific holidays or events, St. Martin's Day, those type of things, you're going to have a lot of activities. But during the peak season, it's usually when we have the most. And also the summer, because summer, a lot of people come here for the summer. There's going to be a lot of events. So I would say the peak season and July, August.
All right.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Once again, I'm being joined by my guest, Mr. Lucien Wilson. He's head over inspection at the TIAT. Do stay tuned. Once again, I'm Charity Dunker. I'll be back right after this.
St. Martin, listen up. The Civil Registry Department has taken 7 services online. That's right, you can now request a family tree, local address change, migration deregistration, a registration form, requests for existing certificates, transfer your driver's license, and a driver's license declaration, all online. Go to services.stmartingov.org/civil registry and easily complete a request form for the service that you need. You can also pay for the services online using a major credit card or debit card and receive certain final products digitally as well. No traffic jams, no waiting in lines, and if you're on island or off, you now have full digital access to 7 civil registry services at services.stmartingov.org/civil registry. That's services.stmartingov.org/civil registry. For more information, call 542-0652. Now go online and request your service form today.
Do you know there is such a thing as teen dating violence? Seriously, there is. When your boyfriend or girlfriend is controlling your every move, trolling you online, checking your social media page, recording you without your permission, or forcing you to do things you don't want to do, this is abuse. If you find yourself in this situation, please talk to someone you can trust. Your parents, school counselor, or the police.
This message has been brought to you by Women's Desk.
Welcome back to this edition of Inside Government Interview, where I'm being joined by Head of Inspection over at TIAT, Mr. Lucien Wilson. Noise pollution. Now, you talk of your team going out there and running tests. How are they being trained?
Very good question. So of course, we start off with the basis of the manufacturer already establishes how the equipment should be used. So our first reference is the manufacturer's manual. We use that in terms of in-field calibrations of the equipment to make sure that it's operating properly. We also have our enforcement policy, which lays out quite extensively how measurements are supposed to be done, from where, how long are you supposed to establish yourself at a point to make sure that you are measuring properly and take into account what we call ambient noise. So there's a level of noise in the environment that exists and that is normal. For some places, it could be very quiet. If you're living, Oyster Pond, a certain place of Oyster Pond, if you're living in town, the ambient level of noise may be higher just because that's where you're living. So you have to factor that in when you're taking measurements, because there's the normal level, and then the nuisance is when it's above normal, which we're talking about was annoying or could be harmful. So there's the enforcement policy, and then there's the manufacturer's instructions on how to use the equipment. Those are the two things that we use to train and guide our employees.
Okay. And the training process, how long does that take?
Well, it's not that long, because you really do have to do in-field training. So a new employee or employee who's never done it before, of course, we will have our information session, and then we go out in the field, and we will you'll go along with somebody who's done it for a while, and you're basically going to learn on the job and reference the enforcement policy to make sure that what's being done in the field is reflected or in sync with the enforcement policy.
All right. Writing up of the report now, however, the process of that, so that will come back to you internally, right?
That the controller writes a report? Yes. Okay. So the controller goes out, does his investigation, comes back into the office, drafts his report, and then that is submitted to me to review, just to make sure that, all our I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and then it's sent into the public prosecutor.
All right. Extended business hours, which provide forms of entertainment, how would that factor in noise pollution?
Yeah, so if a business has extended operating hours past 12 a.m., those extended operating hours can prolong any potential nuisance that business is generating. So this is usually factored into the decision in terms of the noise level or the decibel level that the business is going to be granted. So a business that's going to be operating, for example, till 2 or 3 a.m., the decibel level is going to be lowered because, of course, the later on you go in the night, the more nuisance that business could potentially contribute, because it's also quieter the later it is at night.
Right. So, and also that factors in, as you mentioned, it has to do how densely populated the area may be as well. So, for example, in the hotel area, that would also have a certain time that the music will have to low down or business will have to close. All of that will come into, I guess, play when you're busy applying for a license, right?
Correct. So the idea is to find, and that's what the residential economic policy is, to find a balance, and it's not easy, but to find a balance between residents and economic activity so that they both can coexist as much as possible in a harmonious atmosphere. It's not easy, but that's our goal.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on the enforcement policy and what it stipulates?
Yes. So the purpose of the enforcement policy is to ensure compliance in all aspects of economic activity that fall under the Ministry of TAYAT. So it's a document that's published. It can be found on the government's website under the Ministry of TAYAT, and basically explains how the department, and by extension the ministry, carries out its enforcement responsibilities. So it's not like we're out there, winging it. No, we have a document that clearly stipulates this is how we are going to engage with the public, in this case businesses, and in other cases residences. This is how we're going to approach these situations, and what you can expect us to do and not do.
Mm-hmm. All right. Before we proceed to the last few minutes of our interview, if someone wants to make contact with the department, we made mention of you would always strongly suggest that they make contact with you, send someone over from your team, and then they check the audio levels and all of that, make sure they fall into compliance within laws of such. And now for someone who's saying, okay, I would like to have my business license issued in a certain range where music is concerned for shows, because I know there are different levels as to what you will be doing in your establishment. It could be discotheque. It can be having an event. It may fall apart, or you're sitting close to a church. Now, we look at entertainment on that aspect. Now, what about churches? How does that work?
Yeah, churches. So we're the Ministry of Economic Affairs, so churches fall outside of our competence because they're not, they don't require a business license from our ministry. So that would, I think, fall more under, general public order. So, which would be the responsibility of the police, because it doesn't matter, I think, if it's a church or it's your neighbor. If they are creating a nuisance, then more likely that you would, contact the police and report that. It could also be, depending on your relationship with your neighbors, you could take that step and say, well, listen, contact your neighbor and let them know that, hey, it was a bit loud last night. Could you be a little bit more considerate in keeping the volume down, depending on your relationship? But in terms of enforcement, you would make those reports to the police.
Okay. Touch base again on the different areas of noise pollution right before we wrap up. Also, the department's contact info and the various team members over at Inspection who would also carry out certain investigations.
Yeah, so our contact information, once again, is there's a general email for the ministry. That's tiatcomplaints@stmartingov.org. Our telephone number is 542-5641. Or you can come by at 1 Erskine Boulevard, number 6, which is on the road to Point Blanche, opposite Fairway Market. And with regards to noise pollution, we deal with noise pollution coming from entertainment-related businesses, bars, restaurants, hotels, and the specific section within my department that deals with that is the economic controls section.
All right. Voice of Mr. Lucian Wilson, Head of Inspection over at TIAT. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. We spoke of what's going on right now, which is the campaign on noise pollution. And again, I appreciate my guests for making time to be here and joining me on this edition of Inside Government Interview. To our radio listeners and also television viewers, I would like to thank you for tuning in and being a part of this edition of Inside Government. If you have missed our broadcast, be sure to log on to the official government website at stmartingov.org for video on demand, and for rebroadcasts of this program, be sure to tune in to St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM. On behalf of our team here at the Department of Communication, I'm Charity Dunker. Thank you very much for tuning in.